What happens when a CEO who's built his life around trust realizes he doesn't even know what's happening inside his own stores? Matthew Ellis leaned back in the worn leather chair of his office, staring at a complaint email from a longtime customer. It wasn't anything earth-shattering, just a note that the last few times they'd shopped at one of his hardware stores, service felt rushed and unfriendly. Nothing specific, just off. He rubbed his face, feeling the weight of it. His father had started the company with a single shop downtown. Now it had grown to 20 stores across 3 states. Matthew had inherited it 5 years ago after his father's sudden passing, and while sales were good, a gnawing feeling had started to grow. He was too far removed. He spent most of his days in the corporate office, reviewing numbers, not seeing people he needed to see for himself. Matthew decided to pick one of the stores at random. Store 17, tucked away in a busy suburban area, seemed like a good choice. He had never personally met the staff. Most of the hiring and training was handled by district managers. Plus, with a corporate chain name and a decent amount of turnover, no one would suspect a middle-aged new guy with a trimmed beard and glasses was the owner. He spent a weekend growing out his stubble, bought some cheap work boots, and put on a name tag that read Matt T. A friend in HR set up a fake application for him as a seasonal hire. It was easy enough to explain away just a guy who needed some extra cash during the summer. When Matthew walked into store 17 on Monday morning, the place smelled of fresh lumber and motor oil. It felt like home. For a second he thought maybe everything would be fine. "Name," barked a woman from behind the counter. He stepped forward. "Matt Thompson." "New hire." The woman, mid-40s, red hair tied back in a ponytail, didn't even glance up from her clipboard. "Supervisor's running late. Go wait by the break room." Matthew found the break room tucked behind the paint aisle. 2 teenagers sat at a table, both wearing worn-out uniforms. One, a thin boy with messy dark hair, was nodding off with his head propped on his hand. The other, a girl with blonde braids, looked exhausted, scrolling through something on her phone. "You knew?" she asked, giving him a tired smile. "Yeah, Matt, you." "Penny," she said, then nudged the sleeping boy. "That's Parker. He worked a 12-hour shift yesterday. Still got school too." Matthew blinked. 12 hours, that's rough." "Yeah, well, don't say anything," Penny said quickly, lowering her voice. "Supervisor's got a thing about no complaining." Before he could ask more, the breakroom door slammed open. "All right, rookies, let's move." A tall man with a barrel chest and a clipboard stomped in. His name tag read Derek Supervisor. His eyes locked onto Matthew. "You're the new guy. Good." "We need bodies," Derek snapped. "You screw around, you're gone. No breaks except lunch, got it?" Matthew nodded, keeping his face neutral. As they filed out to the floor, Matthew caught snippets of Derek barking orders at Parker and Penny, assigning them to lug heavy bags of soil and mulch outside in the heat. No gloves. No water breaks mentioned. He watched as Parker, barely 5'7" and skinny as a rail, struggled to haul a 60-pound bag onto a cart. "Move it," Derek shouted from across the lot. "You want to go home early? Move faster." Penny wiped sweat from her forehead with the sleeve of her shirt, her face flushed. Matthew's gut twisted. He clenched his fists at his sides, forcing himself to stay calm. He needed to see more before reacting. Throughout the day, it only got worse. Derek assigned Parker and Penny to the heaviest jobs, while older employees stocked shelves inside with air conditioning. Derek hovered constantly, yelling if they slowed down, even when Parker clearly looked dizzy. At one point, Parker dropped a bag. It split open, soil spilling everywhere. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Derek bellowed, marching over. He jabbed his finger into Parker's chest. "You break it, you fix it. You're staying late tonight to clean this mess." Parker stared down at the ground, cheeks burning red. Penny stepped between them, her hands shaking. "It's not fair, Derek. He's exhausted." Derek sneered. "You want to join him?" "Keep running your mouth." Matthew's hands itched to rip the clipboard out of Derek's hand and tell him exactly who he was, but he forced himself to stay in character. He needed to be smart. After his shift ended, Matthew sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel. His heart pounded. These were kids. Kids who needed jobs, who trusted adults to treat them right. And Derek was breaking that trust every second he stayed in charge. Matthew stared out at the fading sun, his jaw tight. He had seen enough. Tomorrow he would come back, and everything was going to change. Matthew arrived early the next morning, the sky still a pale gray. The store's front lights buzzed to life as he parked in the far lot. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Parker's hunched shoulders and Penny's flushed face under the blazing sun. Inside, the store was quiet. A few employees busied themselves with opening tasks. Derek's voice cut through the calm as he barked at a young woman trying to set up a promotional display. "That's crooked. We're not running a flea market here," he snapped, yanking the sign out of her hands and shoving it into place himself. Matthew kept his head down, grabbing a broom and sweeping the entrance like he belonged there. The girl picked up the discarded promotional materials without a word, her lips pressed into a thin line. By the time the store doors opened to customers, Derek had already assigned Matthew to unloading a shipment of concrete pavers, heavy, awkward, and dusty work. As Matthew struggled to lift the first pallet's worth, he noticed Parker trudging toward him with a dolly, his uniform hanging off his thin frame. Matthew leaned closer. "You all right?" Parker shrugged, his eyes downcast. "Just tired." "Gotta finish this before noon or Derek said he'll cut my hours." Matthew's stomach twisted at the casual cruelty. Hours meant paycheck. Paycheck meant rent or groceries. He kept moving, biting his tongue until the right moment. Around mid-morning, Penny was assigned to the tool rental desk alone. Matthew caught glimpses of her struggling to manage customers while the phone rang endlessly. He overheard a man in a suit at the counter snapping his fingers impatiently while she dug through paperwork. "Where's your manager? This is ridiculous," the man barked. Penny's voice wavered. "I'm doing the best I can, sir. It's just me right now." The man threw his hands up and walked off, muttering under his breath. Penny wiped her eyes quickly, pretending to adjust her name tag. Matthew's fists curled at his sides. He couldn't believe this was how customers and employees were being treated. Derek strolled by minutes later, sipping a soda. He didn't so much as glance at the chaos around the tool desk. Instead, he turned his attention to Matthew. "You," Derek said, jabbing the air in Matthew's direction. "Truck just dropped off lumber. Go stack it. And make it quick, we're expecting a regional visit soon. I want this place spotless." Matthew set down the broom and headed toward the loading dock. As he rounded the corner, he spotted a man in a blue-collared shirt leaning against a forklift, scrolling through his phone. His name tag read Travis Assistant Manager. "Hey," Matthew called out, "I'm supposed to move the lumber. Is the forklift available?" Travis didn't even look up. "Forklifts for certified staff only. You're lifting by hand." Matthew blinked. "That's a lot of weight. Shouldn't we use—" "Don't care," Travis said, pocketing his phone and walking off. Across the store, Parker struggled to pull a loaded cart uphill toward the garden center. Customers glanced over but said nothing. One of the cart's wheels caught on a crack and it tipped, spilling bags of mulch across the sidewalk. Parker bent down immediately, trying to gather them. Derek was on him in seconds. "You're a damn liability," Derek roared loud enough for customers to turn their heads. "Clean that up or you're fired." Matthew dropped the stack of lumber he was carrying and marched over. He crouched beside Parker, helping him lift the bags back onto the cart without saying a word. Parker's hands were scraped raw, tiny cuts visible across his knuckles. "Go get cleaned up," Matthew said quietly. "I can't," Parker whispered. "Derek'll dock my hours." Matthew's jaw tightened, but he nodded. He couldn't blow his cover yet. By noon, the store was buzzing with customers. Lines at the register stretched long, but only 2 cashiers worked. Matthew caught sight of Travis lingering by the customer service desk, laughing with another employee behind the counter while the lines grew. A woman with a crying toddler tried to get someone's attention at the paint counter, but no one came. Matthew watched as she finally gave up, dragging her cart toward the exit, her face flushed with frustration. Matthew dumped his gloves in a trash can on his way to the restroom. Inside, he splashed cold water on his face, staring at his reflection. He looked tired, older. But his mind was clearer than it had been in years. This wasn't just a bad day, this was a broken system. After his lunch break, a rushed sandwich eaten standing by the loading dock door, Derek hauled Matthew into a cramped office near the back. "You're too slow," Derek said, tossing a crumpled report onto the desk. "If you can't keep up, you're gone." Matthew crossed his arms. "Maybe if we had enough staff or the right equipment," Derek leaned in, his breath sour. "Excuses? You want a paycheck, you shut up and do what you're told." Matthew stared at him, something cold settling in his chest. Fine, if Derek wanted to play games, Matthew would end them. That afternoon, a customer tripped over a loose hose left stretched across an aisle. Matthew rushed to help her up. She waved him off, bruised but more embarrassed than hurt. Travis wandered over, glanced at the hose, and laughed. "Guess we'll get another lawsuit." "Whatever." Matthew gritted his teeth. Deregulation, negligence, disrespect. It wasn't just Derek. It was the whole leadership at this store. At closing time, Matthew caught up with Penny outside the break room. She sat on a crate, unlacing her boots slowly, her movements stiff. "You've been here long?" he asked, keeping his voice casual. 4 months, she said, not looking up. "Feels like 4 years sometimes. You ever think about quitting?" Matthew asked. She shrugged. "I need the paycheck." "College isn't gonna pay for itself." Matthew nodded, understanding more than she could know. "Parker?" he asked. She hesitated. "He's saving up for his mom's medical bills. She's sick and he's the only one working right now." Matthew's chest tightened. He thanked her and headed for the exit, his mind racing. This wasn't going to fix itself. Good people were trapped here because they had no other options. He unlocked his car and sat behind the wheel for a long moment, the engine idling. Tomorrow, he would not be coming back as Matt Thompson. He would be coming back as Matthew Ellis, owner of Ellis Hardware, and he would be bringing hell with him. Matthew arrived just before opening, but this time, he wore a crisp button-down shirt and dark jeans, nothing flashy, but sharp enough to stand out among the usual uniforms. The district manager, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s named Linda, had agreed to meet him after he called her late the night before. No explanations, just a firm request to be there before the store opened. She pulled into the lot, stepping out of her car with a clipboard in hand. Her eyes widened slightly when she recognized him. "Mr. Ellis?" she asked, approaching quickly. Matthew nodded. "Morning, Linda, let's walk." As they moved toward the sliding doors, Matthew explained in low tones exactly what he had witnessed. He spoke calmly, but the words came out clipped, his anger tightly leashed. Linda listened without interrupting, her face growing more serious with every step. Inside, the store buzzed with the chaos of opening. Derek stood near the front counter, barking orders at a cashier who fumbled with the register keys. He didn't notice Matthew and Linda walking briskly past toward the back offices. Matthew pushed open the door to the tiny manager's office without knocking. Travis lounged at the desk, sipping a coffee and scrolling through his phone again. Travis looked up, confused. "Can I help you?" Linda stepped in beside Matthew. "Put the phone down." Travis blinked, slow to process. Sure, who's this guy?" Matthew stepped forward, his voice steady. "I'm Matthew Ellis. I own this company." The color drained from Travis's face. He set the coffee down so hard it sloshed over the rim. Linda didn't give him a chance to recover. "Get Derek, now." Travis scrambled to his feet and hurried out, nearly knocking over a supply cart in his rush. Matthew crossed his arms, surveying the cramped, cluttered office. Papers were strewn across the desk, half-finished inventory sheets buried under fast food wrappers. A maintenance log sat unopened on a side table. Less than a minute later, Derek stomped into the office, irritation written all over his face. "What's going on?" Derek demanded. His eyes flicked from Linda to Matthew, confusion dawning slowly. Linda kept her tone cold. "You're speaking to Mr. Ellis." "Sit down." Derek hesitated, then dropped into the nearest chair. His knee bounced nervously. Matthew leaned forward, resting his palms on the desk. "You've been running this store like it's your personal kingdom, overworking minors, ignoring safety protocols, disrespecting employees and customers, neglecting basic operational standards." Derek opened his mouth, but Matthew cut him off with a look. "You're done," Matthew said. "Effective immediately." Derek shot up from the chair, his face flushing red. "You can't just—" Linda stepped between them. "You're terminated for cause. Your final paycheck will be mailed. Security will escort you out." Travis shrank against the wall, his face pale. Matthew turned to him. "And you enabled all of it. You stood by while customers were mistreated and employees were put at risk. You're done too." Travis's shoulders sagged. He didn't argue. He just nodded weakly and followed Derek out of the room, a security guard summoned from the front following them closely. Once they were gone, Matthew let out a slow breath. "Get the employees together," he told Linda. Now, 15 minutes later, the entire staff gathered near the seasonal section. They looked wary, exchanging glances. Penny and Parker stood toward the back, Penny clutching her apron with both hands. Parker's eyes were rimmed with exhaustion. Matthew stood on a flatbed cart so everyone could see him. "My name is Matthew Ellis," he said, projecting his voice across the space. "I started working here a few days ago under a fake name because I needed to know what was really happening in my stores." A ripple of murmurs moved through the group. "I saw hard work, dedication, people doing their best without the support they deserve. And I saw leadership that failed you." He met Penny's gaze, then Parker's. "That ends today," he gestured to Linda, who stepped forward. "Linda is your district manager. She's staying on site for the next 2 weeks. We're bringing in an interim manager from one of our top-performing locations to take over while we rebuild." He paused, letting it sink in. "We're doubling shift coverage immediately. No one under 18 will work more than 30 hours per week. Every employee will receive mandatory breaks, no exceptions. Safety training starts tomorrow morning and attendance is paid." Penny's mouth fell open slightly, but she quickly covered it, blinking hard. Matthew continued. "If any of you feel unsafe, overworked, or mistreated, you have a direct line to my office. No middle managers, no delays." He stepped down from the cart. "Today we start fixing this, together." The group broke into scattered applause, hesitant at first, but growing stronger. Matthew motioned for Parker to meet him near the tool rental counter once the crowd dispersed. Parker approached slowly, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Sir," Parker started, eyes darting nervously. Matthew shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to Parker. Parker opened it carefully. His eyes widened. "That's a scholarship form," Matthew said. "We have a program for employees pursuing education or caring for family members. I'm fast-tracking your application. Full coverage for community college courses starting next semester." Parker's hands shook slightly as he gripped the paper. He swallowed hard, trying to find words. Penny hovered nearby, watching. Matthew turned to her. "You're promoted to senior associate. You'll help train new hires when they come in. Pay bump starts next week." Penny's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them away quickly. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I know you won't," Matthew replied. Linda approached, handing Matthew a clipboard with updated schedules. "We've got extra shifts covered by the float team already en route from nearby stores," she said quietly. "Should stabilize within 72 hours. Matthew nodded. "Good, make sure the hiring fair is set for Saturday. We need fresh blood, but we're hiring slow and careful. No shortcuts." Linda smiled slightly, the first hint of warmth he had seen from her all morning. As the employees slowly returned to their tasks, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't cheerful, not yet, but the tension had lessened, replaced with a cautious hope. Matthew stayed on the floor for the rest of the day, helping stock shelves, jumping on a register when the line got too long, answering customer questions. He knew trust wouldn't be rebuilt in a day. But it was a start. Later that evening, after the store closed, he sat with a few employees in the break room. They shared stories not about the bad days, but about why they stayed. Penny talked about wanting to run her own business one day. Parker shared memories of helping his mom fix up their old house, learning to use tools before he could even ride a bike. Matthew listened. Really listened, and he made himself a promise. He would never let distance blind him again. The company his father built wasn't just shelves and hammers. It was people, and they deserved better. 2 weeks later, Store 17 looked different, but real progress came slower than Matthew had hoped. Strengthening a foundation cracked by years of neglect took more than goodwill and a few policy changes. The interim manager, a sharp but fair woman named Carmen, had taken the reins, and though the employees were still cautious, small shifts had started to show. Matthew returned not as a visitor but as a working presence. He spent each visit walking the aisles, checking in caps and talking to employees directly. He wasn't there to inspect. He was there to understand. On Thursday afternoon, he found Penny near the power tool section, organizing shelves with a clipboard balanced in one hand. She glanced up when she saw him and tucked a loose braid behind her ear. "How's the new role treating you?" Matthew asked, resting a hand lightly on the top of a display. Penny set the clipboard down carefully. "It's a lot, more responsibility than I thought, but it feels good." "Real good," Matthew nodded. "You're doing important work. Customers notice when the floor's organized. It makes them stay longer." Penny hesitated, then said, "Some of the new hires are pretty green. I'm trying to be patient, but it's not easy teaching and doing my own tasks." "That's leadership," Matthew said. "Not just getting your work done, but lifting people up while you do it." She gave a small, thoughtful nod, clearly mulling that over. Matthew spotted Parker unloading a pallet at the far end of the aisle. His movements were still deliberate, but stronger now, more sure of himself. Carmen had shifted his schedule to part-time around his classes, and it showed. He wasn't dragging through the day anymore. Matthew made his way over. "How's school?" he asked. Parker wiped his hands on his jeans before answering. "It's good, harder than I thought, but I like it. Feels like I'm doing something that matters." Matthew leaned against the rack, making sure his tone stayed light. "That's because you are." Parker shifted his weight, then asked, "You ever think about quitting when things got tough?" Matthew tilted his head, considering. "Plenty of times, but I remembered why I started, and that kept me going." Parker nodded slowly, absorbing the words. Linda approached from the main aisle, a folder tucked under her arm. Her steps were quick, but not rushed, a marked difference from the frantic energy that used to fill the place. "We've got a situation at checkout 3, she said quietly. "Mind taking a look?" Matthew followed her to the front. At checkout, a tall man in a mechanic's uniform was arguing with a cashier, a teenager whose hands shook slightly on the register. The man's voice carried across the entryway. "You're charging me for something I didn't buy. Fix it." The cashier, a boy named Lewis, stumbled over his words. "Sir, I just scanned everything you put on the belt. I can get a manager. You're trying to rip me off." The man barked, slamming his palm on the counter hard enough to rattle the card reader. Matthew stepped forward without hesitation. "Sir," he said evenly, "if you'll allow me, I'll personally review your receipt." The man turned, sizing him up. "And who the hell are you?" Matthew kept his voice calm. "Someone who believes you deserve to be treated fairly." The man hesitated, then shoved the crumpled receipt at him. Matthew glanced through it quickly. The item in question was a drill bit set rung up twice. "Looks like a mistake," Matthew said. "We'll refund the extra charge immediately." The man crossed his arms, still scowling, but he said nothing else. Linda processed the refund while Matthew remained nearby, making it clear without words that intimidation wouldn't be tolerated. As the man left, Lewis let out a shaky breath. "Thank you," he whispered. Matthew clapped him gently on the shoulder. "You did the right thing asking for help. That's why we're a team." Later that day, he gathered the staff in the break room after closing. It was the first informal meeting since the leadership changes, and Matthew wanted to check the pulse of the store. The employees settled into chairs and leaned against counters, a few still in their aprons, some sipping from water bottles. Matthew stood near the door, arms crossed loosely. "I know it's been a rough few weeks," he began, "and I know change isn't easy." He paused, letting the silence settle. "But I need you to know something. I'm not here to babysit. I'm not here to make speeches every month. I'm here because what you do matters. Every customer who walks through those doors is trusting us with their time and money. And every one of you deserves leadership that treats you with respect." Penny shifted in her seat, leaning forward slightly. Parker rested his elbows on his knees, listening intently. Matthew continued, "Mistakes will happen, that's human. But disrespect, laziness, and cruelty. Zero tolerance." He scanned the room, making eye contact with as many people as he could. "If you ever feel like you're being treated unfairly again by a supervisor, a coworker, even a customer, you bring it to Carmen, to Linda, or to me. No fear. No retaliation." Several heads nodded, the tension in the room easing. An older employee, a stock associate named Reggie who had kept mostly quiet during the turmoil, raised his hand slightly. Matthew nodded to him. "Got a question," Reggie said. "You serious about sticking around?" "Not just today." Matthew smiled, not the polished smile he used at board meetings, but something real. "I'm serious. This store's not just numbers on a report to me anymore. It's faces, names, stories." Reggie grunted, satisfied. Matthew clapped his hands once. "All right, go home, rest up. We've got a busy weekend ahead." The employees filed out, chatting quietly among themselves. The atmosphere was lighter, not cheerful yet, but no longer weighed down by fear. As Matthew locked up the office later that night, Carmen caught up to him near the exit. "You know," she said, "not a lot of owners would bother." Matthew shrugged. "My dad would've." Carmen nodded slowly. "You're rebuilding more than a store, you're rebuilding trust." Matthew glanced back across the darkened sales floor. Rows of tools, paint cans, and lumber stretched out under the soft hum of security lights. He thought about Parker studying late after shifts, about Penny stepping into leadership before she even realized she could, about Lewis standing his ground at the register, about Reggie speaking up after staying silent too long. It wasn't perfect yet. It might never be perfect, but it was honest, and that was worth everything. Matthew stepped outside into the cool night air, pulling the door shut behind him. The stars overhead were faint, blurred by city lights but still shining. He smiled to himself, heading toward his car. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But now he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't face them alone.